You're listening to the On Your Mark podcast, a space for honest conversations with the school system leaders shaping what's possible for early readers. From high-impact tutoring to building trust with families and teens, we dig into what it really takes to make early literacy work for all kids. Welcome to the On Your Mark podcast. I am your host, Mindy Sjoblom, and I am excited to be joined today by Danae Reynolds, who is the Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction at Palo Alto Unified School District. She has been instrumental in leading the district's Every Student Reads initiative, which is a comprehensive early literacy program that was established in the 21-22 school year that aims to ensure all students achieve reading proficiency by the end of third grade. Danae, welcome. I'm so excited for this conversation and to have you on the podcast today because I have a feeling we're all going to learn a ton from this conversation.
Thank you, Mindy.
Oh, thanks so much for being here.
Excited to be here. Yeah.
Where we are right now, it's a Friday, so I always appreciate the combos on a Friday because we're all kind of winding down and getting ready for the weekend. So appreciate you saving some energy for us as well.
Yeah.
I'd love to just sort of move things just to allow our listeners an opportunity to be able to get to know you a little bit. Can we just back up a bit? And can you tell us a little bit about your path to this seat? Where did you start in education? Where have you sort of meandered over the years? And what brings you to this role in particular?
I actually started in the Central Valley as a kindergarten, third grade, and first grade teacher in Merced City School District, where I got tremendous training on literacy instruction and was even able to get a reading specialist credential working with that school district and Fresno Pacific University. We had a great partnership for teachers that wanted to learn more about reading instruction. I taught 1 year in Berkeley Unified, first grade, and then came to Palo Alto in 2000 as reading specialist at Barron Park Elementary School. I was there for 7 years, was at the district office as a TOSA and coordinator, and then elementary school principal for 10 years, 4 years at Escondido Elementary, which has our Spanish immersion program. Half of the school is learning in Spanish. The other half is a traditional neighborhood program. And then 6 years at El Carmelo Elementary School, which is in the heart of Midtown Palo Alto. And then this is, I guess, starting year 5 at the district office, leading our Every Student Reads initiative and all curriculum and instruction now. And this is year 2 as Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction. So now it's TK-12.
Awesome. So you get to see what reading looks like across the board, from our youngest learners all the way to our high
seniors.
School.
Yeah,
Pretty
it's
incredible.
exciting.
So one thing that I saw online was that you all have around 80% of your students who are meeting or exceeding grade level benchmarks in English language arts. That's pretty incredible, especially when you compare it to a statewide average that, looms underneath 50% of students meeting that bar. Could you tell us a little bit about what are some key steps that you've been developing and putting in place to ensure that your students are able to see that level of success?
Our school board back in 2000, spring of 2021, coming out of COVID, really wanted to focus on literacy. And they looked at our data and the percentage looks great until you start to really drill down into specific student groups. And once the board saw that we had student groups of our students that weren't making that percentage of being on or above grade level on the CASP or SBAC in English language arts, they asked our superintendent to address it. And that's how the Every Student Reads initiative came to light. And we really wanted to look at what was it that was going to move the needle for our students. And having been an elementary principal and working with parents like you who had children who, in first grade, second grade had enough background knowledge and vocabulary to read a leveled text and comprehend it fairly well. But then once they moved into third, fourth, fifth grade, and they didn't have the background knowledge, right, and they were reading more multisyllabic words, all of a sudden they weren't really reading. They weren't comprehending. Their fluency wasn't as strong anymore, and they were struggling. And we really started to wonder, what's going on? Because the program that we were using at the time, right, was showing kind of an up and down depending on the text they were given. They're running records. Sometimes they had the great comprehension and sometimes they didn't, right? And I sent two of my teachers, my reading specialists and my EL specialists, to an Orton Gillingham training. And it's 40 hours, it's 5 days. Halfway through, I'm getting text messages from them saying, this is what we need. This is what our teachers need. This is what our students need. We're already thinking about students that need this really specific instruction in phonics, right? That is really around addressing the very unique needs of students, but also can support all learners, right? Because if you don't have systematic explicit phonics as a young student, where you learn how to break the code, once you start reading multisyllabic words, right, and texts where you don't have all the background, you don't know how to crack the code. You don't relate. Students don't have the skills, right, to know what to do. And they could see that. They could see that where we had first and second graders that could use this, but also fourth and fifth graders who didn't have these skills, right? So once they came back, they changed their groups, and they started implementing the Orton Gillingham methodology, and we started to see growth in our students, right? And then it was a matter of, all right, as a principal, how do I get more teachers this
Yep.
training? And I had this vision of all teachers by, over time being trained across my site. And we started doing that, getting with first grade and second grade. And I had one third grade teacher trained, and we were seeing growth and movement within our students. I had my ed specialist trained. And so we were working, as a system, right? Where it wasn't just classroom teachers. It wasn't just the special ed teacher. It wasn't just the reading specialist. Like, we were working together. And my school psychologist, of course, was like, yeah, OG is great. Like, she knew from way back, right?
You did.
And so it just really, and I went myself, I went over the
Yeah.
summer and took the training, and then it was like I was hooked, right? And having been a reading specialist, I started to think about all of the students that didn't have this systematic explicit instruction, and realizing, wow, if back in 2000 I had known about OG, what a difference it would have made for the students that I was working with, right? Using a different program. The other part that was really important, um, in terms of the methodology that I hadn't really thought about, was because it's systematic and explicit, because kids know the routine every day, they're just learning a new concept, their affective filter can go down, and they can really concentrate on the concept rather than a cute, fun phonics program where it's a game and there's a new way of learning it. Some children are going to have to focus on that, and they can't focus on learning the concept, right? And so where for adults it may feel boring, that it's repetitive and we already know our phonics. And so as an adult, we had to remove the adult kind of maybe feeling about, gosh, this is not as fun and engaging as
Yep.
some of these games are, right? But for the kids, they're the ones who need it. They're the ones who don't have their phonics. They're the ones that need this. And so by creating a system where the kids already know what to expect and all they have to focus on is this new concept, they learn it, right? And it
Yeah.
makes a difference. And it's fun for them. And then if I actually know this, my behavior is going to change because I feel good about myself. I can actually read this text. I know what to do. I know I have strategies. And then the other part was the decodables, right? And so for me, it was a lot of unlearning because I had come up in an era of decodables are bad and decodables are boring and right, and they're not real books and all of that, right? And it was, no, wait a minute. If this is a student who is a struggling reader or is at risk of reading difficulty or may have dyslexia and we don't know it,
Mm-hmm.
it may take 40 repetitions before this concept is actually learned. And so having decodables can help children have that repetition. So it's not just the OG methodology. It's then how do you actually transfer, right? And
Totally.
so having decodables that look like the kids, right? That are with various interests of our students. So a lot of these publishers have really taken that on And we've started to buy decodables from different publishers that will bring in those concepts in ways that each individual child might relate to better, right? So we've got one publisher who does books in a series. How fun is that, right? To
Right.
be a first or a second grader
And
reading
like
this
you're reading
book.
chapter,
It's like you're
right?
reading a chapter book, and everybody loves a book in a series. You can't wait to find out what's going to happen with this character next, right? Or other decodables where the characters are, sporty or whatever it may be, right? And so that was the other part, was shifting our mindsets around moving from leveled books into decodables, but thinking about them around, we're teaching a concept and the students are now building their repertoire with this concept, and it's making it easier for them to actually move into real books written for real kids by fabulous authors. Like, that's still what we want. We still want kids to be able to go to the library, check out whatever they want to read, but they can actually read it. They can actually make meaning. They can actually have a transaction with the text and enjoy it. So we started to see those changes. I also had a teacher who came from Chicago,
Yay.
kindergarten teacher, and he's like, Danae, we're not doing phonemic awareness. And where I came from, the school where I was working, we used this program called Haggerty, and I think we need to use it. And okay, right? So he gave me the information, super inexpensive, right? In terms of buying the resource for teachers. K2 teachers all got their Haggerty books. We got
Mhm.
them trained. They started teaching phonemic awareness, right? So now we're in this process of learning this research that's coming out about how the brain learns to read, about orthographic mapping, about why phonemic awareness is so important. And my school psychologist is saying, yes, of course, every time we qualify a student as having a learning disability in reading, it's about their phonemic awareness, right? It's about phonological processing. Yes, this is what we should be doing.
Yep.
So it all just sort of started to come together for us, and maybe not in a, a sequential way, right? But eventually we got there. And then we started to see change, which was great. And our kids were reading. And it, it was still taking time. We were still grappling with, is it language for our English learners, or is it reading? Is it both? Right? So then really thinking about language acquisition, thinking about what do we need to support our students who are developing English, and where does all of that fit also in this whole process. And we found that, oh, well, it really makes sense that if this student comes from a country where they don't have English phonemes, we should probably teach them, right? And they need to learn them,
Pretty
and
straightforward, right?
right? It
Yeah.
needs to be explicit also, right? So it's not necessarily a problem with the student. It was more, what were we needing to shift in our practice to meet the children where they are, and really start to hone in on what that meant, right? The other thing that I was noticing was the assessment we had been using for reading, where the children would read and then teachers would take a running record and then ask comprehension questions. I forever, as an educator, used the same assessment, right? Um, didn't give our teachers enough information on what to do. They knew they couldn't answer comprehension questions. We did a lot with comprehension, but it still didn't address why, which was the decoding, right? Which was the phonological processing, which was putting it all together. And so depending on the text, right, and your background knowledge and your experiential vocabulary, you may do really well. But on another text, you may not if you don't have that same, right? So that was something that, as I would meet with teachers and talk about, okay, Mindy, Danae is not reading on grade level. This text is saying, she's a fifth grader and she's reading at third grade level, whatever, 38, whatever it was. What are you going to do? And teachers would say, small group. And we didn't have the what,
That's
right?
right.
Because it was just vocabulary, because for the most part, the kids looked fine on the running record in terms of their decoding, right? But it wasn't matching. So
Yep.
once we actually started using OG and we could look at their actual assessment, it provided teachers more of the what, right? What they had to teach specifically in small group, right? So as a principal, that we had always had this feeling of we didn't have enough, but we didn't know what that enough was. And now, with the shifts we've made with our curriculum, with our methodology, we have more very, very concrete, specific information about our readers. So once I came to the district office, all of our teachers across the district, K-3, were trained in the Institute for Multisensory Education's Orton Gillingham program. That really got us moving as a district. Um, Principals also got trained. They sat in the 40 hours just like I had. And we worked with principals in two ways. One was as principal teams going, and this is after COVID, right? So everyone's wearing masks. It's
Yes.
2021. We're all wearing masks. We're going into classrooms as teams of principals to observe Orton Gillingham lessons and to give so we could calibrate around what it should look like and to support teachers with it, because this was something we had never really done as a school district, to mandate all K-3 teachers have this type of training. Like, that was new for us. And that came from our board and our superintendent, saying, we really want to shift. And what's one way we can do that? We knew that we needed to have a systematic, explicit phonics program. The other thing that we did, which was a surprise to me, was our superintendent said, yes, and we're going to do an English language arts adoption. That year, we had a pilot committee and we looked at 3 different curricula, and we piloted and ended up selecting Benchmark Advance. And that's the curriculum that we're using, which is based in what we know about structured literacy. And so our board actually approved Benchmark Advance for reading. They approved the Orton Gillingham methodology for phonics. And we actually kept the units of study in writing, which we had been using previously, and they approved that for our writing program. We do allow teachers that want to use Benchmark's writing, they have it, it's all embedded. So if they find that there are explicit lessons in Benchmark writing that would support what's happening with the units of study in writing, they can absolutely use it, right? Because we know that more explicit writing instruction for students, especially our struggling students, might be more beneficial and give them that foundation to then be able to write those really gorgeous stories and spend time with a piece, right?
It's so important that you notice that, because I think often when we're talking about structured literacy, we miss the encoding part, right? Like, we do focus on all of the things that really lead: phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, really focusing on decoding. And then, but if we're not actually, the students don't then have an opportunity to also practice that in their writing, it's not going to be quite as sticky as what we want them to see. So it's cool to hear that you all are incorporating those two things.
And what's great about our curriculum with Benchmark is there's a lot of writing, right? As the kids are annotating the magazines and the teachers are asking critical thinking questions, the students have to find it in the text, and then they need to write about it as part of the reading work, right? So there's this really nice reading, writing component. And then with the encoding piece of OG, right, the dictation, the pounding and the tapping, we are encouraging teachers to remind students you can do that when you're writing your pieces, right? It's not just during OG instruction, right? We want it to transfer. We want you thinking about the sounds that you hear and the phonemes that you hear in the word you're trying to write during your writing, and go ahead and do that pounding and tapping. So really trying to make sure, right, that these skills transfer. It's not in isolation, right? It's really important.
I want to underscore one of the things that you said a little bit earlier that's sticking with me now as well. I think a lot of times the adult brain, as you said, thinks that the systematic teaching of these early skills is boring and that kids aren't going to be interested in it. And I think really highlighting that a great teacher makes anything interesting for kids. And that part of the sell is making sure that we're bringing that joy and that excitement even to things that feel maybe rote or routine to us, because there's safety in those structures for kids, right? To be able to know predictability. I know what I can expect. That creates really safe spaces for students to learn.
Absolutely. And we do that with, classroom management, right? We have our rituals and routines in terms of our expectations for how we come to the carpet, how we work with a partner, what it looks like when we transition, right? So, and kids know those routines. So it's the same idea, just with explicit instruction, right? And it's not to say that kids still don't have voice and choice, because they absolutely
For
do.
sure.
But how much more fun is it to have choice when I can actually make meaning, right? Then
So
it's
much more
enjoyable,
fun.
right? Like school becomes fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's important,
Right.
especially if you are dyslexic or may have a reading difficulty, right? So the fact that we can actually address it early with our students and start to give them what they need from the beginning is, to me, is a game changer. It's huge, right? And supporting a learner all the way
Yeah.
through.
And we've heard that from some of the schools that we support in tutoring, as we work with early elementary students who struggle in reading as well, and provide them with intervention lessons through tutoring. One of the best things that we hear is when teachers tell us, this student that we've been working with usually doesn't participate in tier one instruction, usually is not the person to raise their hand in core. And then all of a sudden they see them start gaining that confidence
Yes.
and start tapping in that way, right? Because
Yes.
they have
Yes.
a system set up, they have a person through tutor and a system that is set up to allow them to build that confidence that they are readers, right?
Yes.
And that
Yes.
they can participate in that way as well. I'm really curious. You were talking about a lot of lessons that you learned starting in the principalship, and how that really took all of your career up until that point, and how you were able to get a building of folks really moving in the right direction. How did you do that then system wide when you moved in? Like, what sort of structures and things did you need to put in place to make sure that that could then spread to multiple schools across the district?
So part was just the requirement that all teachers took OG. And so what we did was we offered training over the summer and we paid teachers to attend. So it was an investment, right? It was an investment in our educators, which we knew would benefit our students, right? So students first, and putting not just money into paying for the training, but paying teachers to attend. And then teachers who
Yep.
didn't attend over the summer, we provided substitutes for them, and then they attended the training during the school year. So by the end of probably April, everyone had been trained K-3 during that 21-22 school year. As that was happening, and again, principals got trained over the summer.
Yeah.
And so then that school year, part of our work as a principal team during the actual elementary principal meetings was visiting classrooms, right? So we have an elementary principal collaborative where we were visiting classrooms and observing and calibrating so we could give, strong feedback to teachers to support them and give teachers what they needed. Part of that was also we read the book Shifting the Balance as an elementary principal group. That was a book study that we had together because it was super helpful in us leading a shift from teachers like me and many of my colleagues, principal colleagues. We had all come up in the era of whole language, all came up in the era of leveled texts. So, and had been very steeped with the units of study in reading and writing. And many of us had been to New York, to Teachers College, and many of our teachers had been. So it was really a shift to go from a more holistic, whole language way of teaching reading to a more structured way of teaching reading, right? So we used that book to support us in how we could support teachers. And so taking all of the strong foundational strategies that teachers learned from Teachers College and then building in what we now know about how the brain learns to read. So just building on, not throwing anything away, also recognizing the mourning that happened, because I even had some mourning, right? A lot of us really felt guilty once we learned more, and um, because we could have been more effective, right, as educators had we had better training. So all of that work supporting each other. And then we also, the other part I think for the principals in making it systematic was it was in their goals as principals, right? Like part of their leadership work, their professional goals was around the Every Student Reads initiative and getting all kids to grade level. We also provided for them photos of every student who was below grade level. And this was back in 21. So we used pocket charts. And back then we were using a different assessment for students, but we had their their spring assessment result with their picture, and they were color coded. So we had all kids. Kids above grade level were blue, kids who were on grade level were green, and then below grade level were yellow. So they could see their whole school. But then it was, let's focus on these kids in yellow. And then how do we move them to the green? How do we move them to the blue? So then it created not just numbers, right, and percentages, but real humans. Yeah. And that was part of the work when we first started together. And I think just seeing who the children are, I mean, and the principals know their kids,
Yep.
but seeing it in that way really, I think, could be impactful, right?
Yeah.
And then for us here at the district office, right, we need to see the kids too. Like, here's who we're talking about. It's not just, 25 kids or 80 kids, but these are the students. So that was also a big part of the work that we did as a collaborative, was really looking at who the students are. And then with each subsequent benchmark, they would add their new reading level. And kids if they were below grade level, they would still keep the yellow card, but maybe they move to the green section where the kids are on grade level. And then also, if the students, their subsequent benchmark moved down, but they had been blue or green, and now they're with kids in the yellow, they could start to see what's happening and what do we need to do to address that for students. So that was the other part of it, was really having a visual to support the work, which I think helped make it meaningful for teachers too, because now, because teachers love their kids, and then seeing their principals have their kids' faces, in their offices and having these conversations. And so principals would bring out their charts when they'd have meetings with teachers or meetings with their teams. And our principals also meet one-on-one with each teacher and go through all of their students and talk about their students. But because we have this initiative around specific student groups, right? Because that was the other thing, is when we drilled down into the data, it was specific student groups who were not meeting grade levels. So we started the Every Student Needs initiative looking at our student groups that were historically underserved. So African American, Latino, Pacific Islander, English learners, students with disabilities, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And one of our school board members, he really felt like, because our overall numbers masked those individual groups, he also added Latino SED as a group that he wanted us to focus on. And partially it was because that student group in our district is large enough to get data that we can present, because some of our groups are really small. And with our focus at third grade, and we were really just looking at third grade results, we may not have enough African American students in a particular third grade cohort to present data, right? Or enough Pacific Islander students, right? But we did have enough Latino students to always present data for third grade, and even enough Latino SED. And we believe as a district, demographics aren't your destiny. You can be low income and you can still learn to read. And for sure, there is, all student groups, right? Race is a social construct, right? Can learn and do learn, right? So it was about, what is the experience that these student groups are having in our system that we need to address and shift, in addition to strong, high quality, evidence-based instruction, right? So if we could move the needle on our Latino SED students, that would really show that overall our system is now really making a difference for the student groups for whom, statewide, it's been a challenge, right? So that was part of it too, was really then honing in on specific students while making sure all kids are achieving at high levels. And that's why having evidence-based, science-based curriculum and instruction is going to make a difference, right? So everyone's getting it, but then really drilling down on what specific students need at the
Yeah.
same time.
I like some of the simplicity that you bring to, or how do we take what is a really complicated system, right, and actually make it as simple as possible. And what I heard from you is like training for everybody first and foremost, and that's from teachers to leaders. Everybody across the board is going to get the training to make sure that they know what to do, making sure there are clear goals and that those goals are visible.
Yes.
So that they are surrounding us all the time, and be those. I just think that anecdote of the actual faces of students behind that data to be really, really powerful. And then the idea of really digging the data to pay attention to subgroups, because if you're just looking at things as a whole, you're going to miss out on some of the
Right.
things that really
Right.
need greater attention. And those are really powerful and simple,
Hmm.
ways to focus in and make sure that
Yes.
you're getting a district-wide implementation of a reading program, just right. It takes that kind of coordination at all those levels.
And as we were visiting classrooms, I would provide principals, the list, because they would tell me which rooms we were going to visit. I would provide them the list of the Every Student Reads Initiative students. And sometimes, kids would have name tags. Sometimes you still couldn't really, but then we could also observe for specific students, and we were looking for their engagement. We were looking for their participation. We were looking for where they were sitting in the room. All of those really important instructional moves, right, that make a difference in the research, right? Which students get called on, which students don't, which students get multiple opportunities to respond, and a little bit of a higher thinking question, and which students don't. All of those things we were looking for, and then giving principals feedback together on the strengths and then areas where they want to, you know, shift and lead, right?
Yeah.
And then they take that on and have individual conversations or bring things up at staff meeting, right? And do that work to lead their sites, but knowing that they've got support from the whole principal community. I think that was really an important part of the work too, right? So not just the training, because you can't just train, right? You've got to provide ongoing support. One of the things that we did, we had a site that took it on. They loved OG. They were kind of like a model site. And teachers were saying, we'd like to see it. Yeah, we've been trained, we're doing it, but we don't know if we're doing it right? And so they became literally a model site, like a lab site, where we would get subs for teachers from other sites, and they would come and we would do walkthroughs with teachers also. So, and the teachers knew they were coming, they would teach their OG lesson. And then the principal actually stayed and talked to the teachers who observed and talked about the work that was happening at her site and how she provided release time or support for her teachers. So that was also a really nice support, I think, for our educators that sometimes we don't think about, is they need to see each other too.
That's
Right.
right.
And it's an investment, right? It's an ongoing investment by providing a substitute, by
Yeah.
principals taking time to meet with teachers that are from other sites and welcoming them in and sharing with them, what's working for them, right? Because the teachers are teaching, they can't necessarily have the conversation, right? And so once we adopted Benchmark Advance and we had all teachers trained, so now we're talking summer of 22, all teachers are trained in this new curriculum that's structured literacy based, right? And it's a very big shift in how we teach reading. We also had them come back. So they got the initial training, and we actually asked them to spread out what is usually a 1 day training over 2 days, slow it down, and give teachers time to process and talk together with each other as grade levels and really talk about how it's different, right? Like we wanted to name and make it clear. We know we're asking you to teach in a way that you haven't taught reading before. So let's slow it down and let's make it meaningful for you, right? And so we took a 1 day and made it over 2 days. And again, teachers were paid to attend over the summer. And then the teachers who couldn't attend over the summer, we provided training during the school year with the release day for subs. And then second semester, we were super ambitious and decided to have their staff, their trainers, their staff developers come in and model a whole group lesson and then small group lesson. And this was based on feedback we were getting from teachers. Again, we want to see it. We want to see it in action. and which I really appreciate, right? Our teachers want to do it right. They want their kids to learn and they want to be as effective as possible. So we worked out a system where we would have teachers from 3 sites, same grade level, come together at one school, and the staff developer came in, modeled lesson in one classroom. Teachers went out, they debriefed, they talked through it, had lunch, then came back and she modeled small group with the teachers, come back, debrief. And we did that with every grade level across all 12 schools, all 6 grade levels had this over time, right? So we're
Yep.
talking from, I think, January to probably April to make this happen. And it was really great because it wasn't just the 3 teachers at one grade level or 4 teachers, at one site, but they got to hear cross-site what was happening with their colleagues and puzzle through things together.
Yeah.
And then in the afternoon, we again said we want the afternoon to be time for teachers to plan, time for teachers to collaborate, and you, staff developer, you're here as the consultant now to answer their questions and help them find things. But it's no longer a sit and get, right? It was really time for teachers to puzzle through and think about their individual students and how they would build their practice. So sometimes it was, oh, can you show me on the website where to find the fluency quick check? Or when you had the lesson on the screen, you zoomed in on this one part. How did you zoom in, right? So
Something so
technical.
practical. Yeah.
And it was what each teacher needed. It wasn't what I thought they needed. It wasn't what the staff developer thought. It was really what the teachers said they needed in that time in the afternoon. And really trying to make it as supportive of our educators, because it was a big shift and and we knew that if our educators felt confident, it was going to transfer to their instruction and therefore student learning. Yeah.
Danae, I think my big takeaway from this conversation and really hearing about your process and your success in Palo Alto is the training matters, but this is not a one and done thing.
Yes.
An ongoing commitment
Ongoing.
to ensuring that teachers have the support that they need. They have access to examples and the opportunity to practice. So it's not just having something delivered to you and then you're expected to go figure it out. It is really about ongoing support if we want to really be able to help support teachers to change, because change is hard, but it's so important that we continue to evolve for our students as well.
And we have teachers on special assignment in Ed Services Elementary. So they were also supporting teachers with all of this change. So making sure they had the new scope and sequence, making sure, like, as teachers were asking for things, they were providing them, providing resources, visiting classrooms, really trying to make it as teacher friendly as possible. And then also giving me feedback, right? Here's what we're hearing. Here's what teachers need, right? So our organization investing in teachers on special assignment to support the classroom teachers also is a big part of how all of this comes together. And the teachers on special assignment also met with principals. So, it's a whole group effort, right? To shift practice and to improve student outcomes. And we are also fortunate to have a director of professional learning. So she and I worked really closely together on how to create this schedule, right? Like hours thinking about who needs to go where and, just the whole thing. And then working with the staff developers and really trying to make it clear, here's what we're asking. And then our partners saying, we don't really provide a training like this, but we like it, right? Like we don't usually do it, right? We usually have our sort of canned training, but no, that's not what we want. We need it to be, it needs to really meet the needs of our teachers. So lots of people coming together, working together, collaborating. So not just me, right, at all, but our director of professional learning, our TOSAs, my boss at the time, right, who is, the assistant soup at the time, assistant soup of Ed Services, right, then also holding principals accountable in their leadership around all of this also. So time at their principal meetings to talk about the Every Student Reads initiative, to talk about teaching and learning, time to go in and observe together. And then I also have opportunity to meet with principals one-on-one, and we would do walkthroughs in classrooms in addition to our collaborative. So lots of touches, lots of support, and just sort of thinking about the kids, right? Always keeping them front and center, not sort of, but definitely thinking about the kids, keeping them front and center, and having the goals to do that.
Yeah.
I presented to the board quarterly on the growth, which, is a great opportunity and fun, but you don't want to give them bad news.
No, you don't.
Right? So,
Here.
yeah. Right. So, and talking through with them, here's what we're going to do here. There were some years where we had a dip, right? We didn't make the growth that we had expected. The board had percentage point growth that they wanted year over year. And there were years where certain student groups didn't make that growth, and having to name it and talk about what we were going to do differently.
I think it's such an important note to end on, is that we need to, when we are really pushing for literacy reform and for change in our districts, we have to keep our students at the center. So I just appreciate you for spending the last 40 minutes with us today. And
wow, I talked a lot. Sorry.
Oh, that's what this is for. And so much to learn from everything that you've all been able to accomplish at Palo Alto. So thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Mindy.
Thanks for joining us on the On Your Mark podcast. If today's conversation sparked a question, idea, or story of your own, we want to hear it. Connect with us on LinkedIn or YouTube, or visit onyourmarkeducation.org to discover how we're accelerating early literacy through powerful school partnerships and evidence-based interventions.